Hi, Chang. How's it
Fancy.
going?
Going well. Going well. How
Yeah,
are
it's
you,
a
Jeff?
little fancy, yeah. So thanks so much for agreeing to stop by for another fireside chat with me. For the viewers
My
who don't
pleasure.
know, we have here Chang Wang, who's the Chief Operating Officer of Overclock Labs, which is the core contributing team to Akash Network. So I know you're on a tight schedule, sir. So I'll jump right into what the Akash holders in our community really want to know right now, right? Uh, so the first thing I want to start with is going to be with Starcluster, right? Recently announced that Akash Accelerate by Greg Osiri himself on the main stage. For those that don't know what it is, Starcluster is a vertical expansion of sorts to Akash Network's offerings, right? Akash Network as a DPIN doesn't really own any of its providers, but now with Starcluster, it kind of wants to, right? So can you share with us what the Akash Starcluster is and its relationship to the Akash network today, and what doing all of this really accomplishes for us?
Absolutely. I think boiling it back down to core principles, and you hit the nail on the head, is Akash Network slash like just the network itself needs to have what I'll consider POC or protocol owned compute, right? At some level. And own is kind of, especially in kind of the deep in space, is the kind of defined not necessarily as like physically holding the chips per se, but the core premise of it is how do we as a network keep compute on the network in a permanent or at least semi-permanent state where the thereby reducing costs, ensuring further stability and consistency, right? So reducing costs in that right now, as you know, PIPs, right, provider incentive pilots 1 and 2, were meant to take funds from the community pool, pay providers ostensibly to bring compute onto the network for some period of time. And that period of time has been about 12-month contracts with said providers, right? And so, though that is good, 12 months might be quite a long time. It isn't in the grand scheme of things, right? So you have to consistently renew these contracts, which means what? Consistently going back to the community pool to draft more and more funds to fund compute, and so growing the total stack of compute on the network becomes challenging, right? Because you want net growth. You don't want to just like keep a baseline there and just like keep petering at around like 800, 900,000 GPUs. We want to really grow that amount. So ensuring that the supply stays on in a permanent or semi-permanent state is really important. Growing the supply consistently over time is extremely important because the more supply you have, the bigger clients, tenants you can attract, the more tenants or clients you can attract, which means network growth and growth of everything else. Right. And this is, of course, in addition to pushing the roadmap forward as far as software goes, capability goes, from confidential compute all the way to virtual machines to a slew of other things that are on the roadmap and other things that aren't yet on the roadmap that are being discussed, right? Both in the community as well as with the core team. So the idea of it is in summary to bring on more kind of what I'll consider protocol owned compute that will stay on the network in a more permanent, semi-permanent state so that we can establish that baseline and build from there in a way that isn't going to fall off every like 12 months, right? Where we have to renew. And in service of that, we're hoping that things become a lot cheaper over time, right? That's one part. And the grand scheme of like wrapping it all together is it further strengthens the moat for Akash Network, right? Because if you only have compute that you are renting, right, or subleasing, if you will, I'm outside right now, so I'm a little so. Pardon me if I'm a little sweaty on
No
camera.
worries.
The having just compute being kind of sublet from providers essentially doesn't give us a lot of power, right? Like, yeah, we have the marketplace, we have the demand that will give the supply these providers, but the to really kind of hone in and put a, so we say like full ownership or not even control, but to build a moat and control over the kind of the entire vertical from the application side, the software and orchestration side, all the way down to the hardware. We need to get to the place where we own the compute. When we say we, right, through the Akash network and Overclock Labs to help facilitate that. So that is the core essence of what the Starbonds is trying, or Starbonds v
Star
Starbonds
cluster and
vis-a-vis
Star
Star
cluster.
Cluster is trying to achieve. Yeah.
Hmm. Okay, so basically, this is supposed to assist in building a moat for Akash network. That sounds like a good thing to have. You did talk about Starbonds there at the end. I got a few questions there as well, because that's the main way that we can integrate in it, right?
Yep.
So I'll ask the questions one at a time. The first one would be, why did the network choose to fundraise through bonds? Right. So 2 comments from our community to address here is, one, are we out of money? Right? Is there nothing left in the tank? Is that why we need to go and get these bonds? And is it, and the second thing that goes with that is, is it over for AKT? Will it be abandoned? All profits are going to go pay Starbond holders, so, we
Oh no.
assume, right? So
Yeah,
it's just
yeah.
that crypto is full of examples where teams are, in with the new, forget about the existing holders, So I really want to ask, why should AKT holders feel good about Starbonds and what we're doing over there?
Oh man, where do I start? So to answer the 2 questions directly is it over? No. Hell no. And if swearing is allowed, hell fucking no.
Yeah.
I'm not going anywhere. The core team isn't going anywhere, right? Greg's not going anywhere. So we're here for it. Are we out of money? No. Again, hell no. And in terms of why through the vehicle of bonds, and this is I mean, no critique to like crypto, but I think just general humanity is like you don't read the whole thing. You like take a tidbit or whatever it is, right? So if you look at, so number one, why bonds, to answer your question directly, and then I'll kind of dovetail into more of the specifics and how it should benefit AKT holders and how it will benefit AKT holders, right? In addition to just the Akash community in general. So
Mhm.
the reason for the bonds is because we want to be able to bring additional outside capital that isn't just within the Akash holder community itself, right? So we want to grow the tent, right? Grow the pool. So this is like, imagine this is the pool of Akash Network AKT holders. We want to grow that size considerably. And we do that through an outside kind of issuance. And we do that through an outside issuance that also has components that will add value, accrue value directly to AKT holders and benefit AKT holders. And I can go into the details of that. So
Mhm.
the number one thing is, one, create a vehicle via the Star Bonds that will enable us, Overclock Labs, to raise a considerable amount of funds to purchase these GPUs and distribute them throughout the Akash network in a way that is consistent with what I described previously. That's one. Hold on, let me move a little bit. The sun is cooking me over here. I'm gonna slightly shift my seat. Apologies. All right. So that's number one. The bonds themselves, right, will are also, so another thing we were kind of like tinkering with is, how do you kind of raise funds in a way that is going to be compliant, secure, and allow us to move very quickly, right? So sure, you can go the pure crypto route, but all of the crypto stuff, like, whatever you think of this regime and how, loose it might be, we don't want to kind of take shortcuts that might end up biting us in the butt, right? As you know, you've been in a Akash Network supporter and insider for what, since the beginning, for what, 4+ years now at this point in time, right?
Mhm.
And most projects out there aren't even around, like, for the projects that are 4 years old, you can probably count on, like, your hands and toes, right? And
Mhm.
so there's that. So we want to make sure we didn't do that, and so doing it through Star Bonds, an actual securitized instrument that is fully regulated, compliant with the SEC, etc., essentially removes the shackles, right? To say, okay, hey, if we play in the gray here, we won't trip SEC rules in this way or that way, but it kind of it handcuffs you, right? So what it prevents, for example, is fractioning and pooling of resources. So in a not in an SEC compliant world that isn't doing like a full securitized offering, you have to do a lot of things that makes the offering less palatable. So, for example, right now, the way the SAR bonds are have been talked about and constructed in terms of idea theory, right, is each bond will be worth $1,000, the par value of 1,000, and that's pretty standard in the financial world, right? And then each bond will be secured by a portion of the revenues and the asset itself, the GPU, part of the asset, the GPU, and the revenues that GPU generates, right? Pool together. So it essentially, so if you have 1,000 GPUs, some GPUs will be utilized, some will be unutilized, right? And it'll kind of fluctuate up and down. But what the securitizing effort allows us to do is to pool all of those resources together and emit them in a single kind of like channel, right? So it's like nicely balanced. So it's not like, hey, this GPU doesn't earn any money, so the GPU owner of this particular GPU doesn't get paid, but it happens that that GPU is rented, so that GPU owner gets paid, right?
Right.
That's not that effective. So in the real world, you can think about it as REITs, real estate investment trusts, right? So you are a developer. Let's say you and I are a developer. We go buy land, we raise debt, we raise equity, whatever it is. We buy land, right? And we build. We secure financing from a bank, and we build like a unit, a building with condos, and then you sell shares of it to kind of backstop or further finance it, right? And those shares have a reference to the income generated by those particular units. It's similar to in this way with Starbonds. So in a REIT, you're not buying a individual apartment, you're buying a share that represents the collection of those units. And so it decreases risk. And it also, so in summary, the securitized offering via Starbonds, why choose to go this route? It sets us up for the long term. It allows this entire effort to be a lot more flexible.
Mhm.
And it allows us to then offer fractionalized shares, right? In addition to pooling resources on the back end to pay out these fractionalized shares, to pay to these fractionalized shares. So that's the construction. I'll say one more thing with regards to how it benefits AKT holders and pause there. So how it benefits AKT holders is a couple of fold actually. Number one, there is the access to Starbonds, right? The greater so there are two kind of vectors when we offer Starbonds: the quantity that you can purchase at a discount, and the how big or deep the discount level is, right? So the way we're structuring is anyone who I think currently stakes a minimum of just 100 AKT, right? For at least 90-day period at the time of issuance, because this is going to take a couple of months to stand up, right? So let's just say we get the issuance out there in October or November or something like that. And if you have AKT, at least 100 staked for 90 days at that point in time, you qualify for a discount on the Starbonds, right? So the percentages are still being worked out, but let's just hypothetically say, the first level is a 5% or 10% discount, right? If you have a stake for 180 days, you get 5% more discount if you have a stake for a year furthermore, right? And if you have a stake for kind of the duration of like the current mainnet two that's been live, which is I think about, let's say 4-year period, I'm putting, hand waving a little bit, but you get kind of the maximum discount, which could be 25%, right?
Mhm.
Again, these numbers are still being fleshed out, but that's the idea of it. How will to answer the direct question, if I'm an AKT holder, how does it benefit me, right? So, okay, for me, the AKT holder, if I have AKT just 100 or more stake, I can purchase these Starbonds that will at a discount. That's number one. Number two is these will benefit the network directly via the mechanisms I said before, bringing more compute to the network, having permanence for that compute on the network, which will then allow us to service more bigger clients and keep them in, right? Because if you have a client, you want to sign them to a multi-year contract, ideally a year plus. The way the current compute is balanced on the network right now, it makes it really difficult, right? Because if we
Mhm.
sign a year-long contract on the demand side to service a particular client or tenant, but we know that the supply is falling off at 8 months, that creates kind of this like weird situation where we as Overclock Labs then have to absorb whatever that potential risk is, and it doesn't look good for the network either, right?
Mhm.
So this will solve that one of those that particular challenge, and so yeah, those are and finally the kind of value accrual beyond just there will be compute on the network, thereby servicing more, thereby increasing network spend, which accrues to utility. More than that kind of second order impact, the direct order impact, this is something again kind of high level, but we haven't fully worked out yet, is accruing value, part of the revenue driven by these Starbonds beyond a certain limit. So in simplistic terms, let's just call one GPU like akin to like a house, right? So
Mhm.
you buy a home, you buy a GPU, there's a debt that has to be serviced. So in the Starbonds, that'll raise that debt for us, right? Through in the house analogy, you go to a bank and you say, give us a loan to buy this house. In a star bond analogy, we issue the bond, give us this money to buy these GPUs. Now, obviously you have to service the debt to the debt holders. In the house analogy, you service the bank. in this analogy, service the bondholders, right? But once those things are satisfied in a house perspective, you accrue equity, right? It's my money, my house, I bought it, I accrue equity. So if I want to sell the house later on, refinance it, that's money that I have accrued. In the case of the equity accrued on the Starbond side, right? Once we again make sure that all the kind of the services are paid for and the debt is serviced properly, the excess, this is something that's like, being ideated on, will accrue back to Akash holders in some way, shape, or form, right? We don't know what that is yet, and again, I put a caveat out there. This is still being fleshed out, and none of this is like set in stone. Just kind of two people talking here, right? But the idea is there because we want this to accrue value to Akash holders as well. And the beautiful thing about this being securitized offering is once you design everything and set these rules really, really clearly, you can communicate these rules out into the world, and they are the rules. Like, so therefore, like, everyone's aware, everyone will have access. You don't have to be an accredited investor. You can be anybody, right? And even internationally, you can access the securitized offering. So it makes it super expansive. It makes it a very securitized, which offers like, investor, or buyer protection as well, because of being a securitized offering. And it puts the onus on the issuer, i.e., here in this case, Overclock Labs via a different entity, right? Because we want to create a whole clean entity just to do this kind of thing, and see if it works. And if it works, we will kind of in sequence proliferate that out to make things really clean, really easy to track, and highly secure. So that's the kind of the entire premise of Starbond. So, again, to wrap these things up, the Starbonds enable us to create a vehicle that is highly compliant, looks after long-term interests, really scalable. It benefits AKT holders by giving AKT holders discounts. The longer you hold, the greater the discount you have. The more AKT you hold, the more bonds at a discount you can purchase. So all of these things accrue value, directly to AKT holders. And part of the hope here is for people who want to access these discounts, they go and acquire AKT, right? So there's also that element of it too. Yeah, so essentially you could call this like proof of stake, right? If you want to purchase these bonds at a discount, you got to prove your stake. And ultimately the value that's generated, the profit margin, right? A portion of that is going to will discern and design hopefully an elegant solution that'll accrue value back to AKT holders, yeah, more than just the utilization itself.
Right. So thanks for that explanation. Actually got through a couple of questions. So I just fired them quick just to get that confirmation. So you said that international buyers are going to be A-OK. That was one of the questions I had, whether or not we're going to be tokenizing this. I heard Greg was looking for ways to port it to Solana, possibly. I don't know if he was talking about that, but yeah, one of the questions were, if we're outside of the US, are we going to be able to purchase this?
Yes.
Yeah.
Outside of the US, yes. As far as tokenizing it, that is something I think we really want to do. Because once you tokenize, so when you issue a security, it's a freaking piece of paper, right? And it's like essentially a legal contract, but there's no it's not composable. You can't take that thing and then embed rules and stuff like that in it that make it essentially like smart contracts. Like one of the big revolutions of smart contracts is like you don't need to prescriptively or you don't need to go through things when things happen at the time they happen to do things according to some like rules that you interpret, right? You can kind of deterministically program in what these things are because rather they are deterministic. If this, then that. If these parameters and they're very strict and deterministic, you can program these things in there via an NFT, via smart contracts that are baked in together. And one example of that is, for example, the GPU has like a useful life of, let's say, 3 to 5 years, somewhere in that window, roughly around 5 years. At the end of the 5-year time period, what happens to it, right? So instead of saving the decision for that point in time later on, or 5 years later, man, I can't remember what my hair looked like 5 years ago. Forget about like these things, right? So you can program into a certain parameters to say at the 5-year point, we will determine today at the beginning, before the 5-year hits, we will have contracted with a refurbisher, a certified refurbisher that comes in and buys these GPUs or commits to, I will pay as refurbisher. I'm pulling a number out of thin air, right? 10% or 20% of what these GPUs were purchased for at the time they were bought brand new in 5 years time from you, so long as like they pass inspection, right? And then you put on all this inspection parameters. So then, boom, when the time comes, refurbisher comes in, like essentially, the smart contract kicks off all these like chain of events, and they can go and do the thing, right? And give the final payout to the ultimately the bond holders, right? So those are things that are really, really important to design and flesh out.
Mhm.
And that's what tokenizing and tokenizing gives us the ability to embed smart contracts. That's what it gives the ability to do. And then on chain, you can like do other things with it as well. But obviously from a regulatory standpoint, if it's a securitized product and you blah blah blah, we have to flesh out the minutia of it. But that's the as far as like what chain it'll go on, that's like not completely determined yet. But yeah, we definitely want to make sure that if we tokenize this, we turn it into an NFT, that it is going to be in a world where there is sufficient, really, really strong, the best market. We're looking for the best market for these NFTs to ultimately exist in, right? So, and finding the best market will ultimately benefit Akash holders as well, right? Because you want liquidity, you want depth, access, exposure, all that stuff.
I see. So recently we saw, there were GPU NFTs on Akash as a part of a test run. So I suppose now you're saying that these might come in like a phase 2, right after the bonds. So bonds is the first thing, then we tokenize it, and then we're able to
It'll
possibly
it'll happen
offer.
concurrently.
Ah,
So
I see.
when we issue the bonds, we have to figure out, probably have each bond be represented as an NFT on chain.
Okay, so the bonds
Um,
are kind of going to be
yes,
like the GPU NFT implementation that Akash is
that's
going to
right.
do, their version,
That's
your
right.
version of it, right? Okay, cool. I want to step back to what you said earlier, regards to the benefits that AKT holders have from Starcluster, right? So the one of the bigger benefits that you explained were the discounts, and then I want to talk a little bit more about the benefit when I just confirmed matter. I just want to say it out loud, which is that the benefit for not people who aren't going to be buying Starbonds, right, is still a vertical integration that would make Akash stronger in terms of providing a better moat, because you guys are going to control this protocol-owned compute, which means that you're not going to be on the whims of community, which is kind of funny, right? Because DPIN is based off of community compute to come sign on, but that inherently has these caveats to it, which you guys are trying to solve for, right? And in some way, by doing this public offering of Starbonds, we're able to now also have decentralized compute in a way, because the GPUs are decentrally owned, but they're managed centrally under, I guess, an Akash container, Akash roof, Akash data
Yeah,
center, I
under
suppose. Um,
it will be under multiple data centers. So one of our core principles is always going to be decentralization, and we'll ensure that these things aren't going to be fully clustered in like a single data center, right? So we'll distribute them as it makes sense. It really depends on the type of the model of GPU we got and we are going after. So those are going to be really, really, really important to
mhm.
determine. But yeah, it'll be something that'll be managed under the Akash umbrella. Overclock Labs will be the administrator initially to ensure this like initial thing works, and the pilot. We're going to be full bore into this pilot to make sure it's a resounding success, because if it is, it can be repeated multiple times and iterated on, right? So the good things that'll come of it is just as you said, adding the mode in addition to the consistency of experience and the offering, and just the longevity of these
Yeah, but that
GPUs.
just makes the AKT marketplace much more palatable, much more enterprise
Much better.
friendly, ready. Yeah, and
Absolutely,
so
yeah.
that should, because ultimately what AKT holders want to see is increase in demand of use of the marketplace, right? So that, of
Exactly.
course, we want to earn those fees. We want to make sure that we're on track, in terms of making sure the community pool is all set, right? And so that's the main concern on there. Um,
Exactly. Yeah.
for the discounts, now let's switch over to the discounts. I'm glad to hear that the discount is legitimate, the discount site is legitimate. My issue is that my oldest wallets from 2021 is registering no discounts. I've also heard a couple of community members,
I'm gonna
people from the
move. I'm
community.
getting cooked again. Sorry. Yeah, I'm
Yeah, no,
listening.
no. I've also heard from a few community members that they are also seeing that there's no benefit, no discount for them. So what gives over there?
Yeah, I'll have to double check that. That might just be some sort of logic error. And we'll have to see exactly. So what the intention of like kind of the initial logic in the discount check, and that check, by the way, is just like an initial thing. We'll obviously refine that. It's not the final thing. So please don't think that, oh, if I don't have it here, I'm lost. So one of the things that we wanted to ensure is that we wanted to try and exclude some of the original Genesis wallets, right? So that that was one of the efforts. But I think what we need to do is fine tune the logic. So I would love for yourself, the community, to bubble up. Hey, like this is my account. How come my account doesn't have access? In which case, if there are flaws in the logic, we need to find those and we need to
Mhm.
fix them, right? Because the idea here is for holders of AKT, the longer you've held, the larger your discount should be, commensurate with the levels that we set. And the more you hold, the more discounted number of bonds you have access to purchasing. So those should be, so if there are errors and you feel you rightfully should have access to the discount, please, we probably need to create some sort of like a form or intake so people can send these things in so we can query against it and see where our logic is incorrect or failing. In some cases, it might be, our logic is correct, and in certain cases, our logic might be incorrect, right? So we have to update that. So it's definitely something we need to take a look at, and we'll flesh out all of these problems before the so-called snapshot, leading up to the offering. So my assurance here is we won't leave anyone behind that is rightfully should be able to access these bonds
Right.
at a
I've
discount.
been
Yeah.
I've been telling them that you guys are so OG that you guys got caught that we got caught in with the early investors at that point, right? So
Yeah.
that's a badge, a proof of honor,
Proof
so
of
to
honor,
speak. Yeah,
exactly. Yeah, if you're holding it
exactly.
for that damn long and you got lumped in with that cohort, I thank
Uh,
you and salute you, you know. Yeah.
yeah, good place to be. So just to surface this point one more time, if I was interested, when can I expect to be able to give you my money for Starbonds? Right? You said somewhere October, November. Is that around the time frame?
Oh, I don't exactly know. I use those as kind of illustrative dates. So please
Gotcha,
don't take
gotcha.
that as gospel. So I mean, just kind of a high level go through some of these logistics, right? You have to determine so I like to kind of get down to the nitty gritty a little bit. So sorry if this glazes anyone's eyes over, right?
Yeah.
You have to determine who you're going to buy the GPUs from. There are resellers, there are cloud partners, there are OEMs, et cetera, like Dell or Supermicro, freaking Lenovo, even, right? So all of these things, you have like we're surveying the landscape. So like if you go from the ground up, right? Okay, we want the GPUs. Who has them? How many can you buy? What are the terms? What's the lead time depending on the model, right? So all of these questions are currently like being asked. And concurrently, we're also asking the questions of if we were to get these things, which data centers are currently set up for and highly reliable, i.e., tier three or greater, that can deploy these GPUs and hopefully in a distributed fashion, right? Something like we'll probably the initial launch keep it to US East, Central, West, something like that. And so can we find the data centers that are going to be service those, and then for those data centers that service these, or hold or house, if you will, these GPUs, what does their pricing look like? Because there are tiers to that too, right?
Mhm.
So we need to make the best decision in regards to that. A third layer is going to be all of these things are happening basically and concurrently now in multiple conversations, is in terms of the creation of the NFTs, in terms of like the entire, because it's really important to understand how each GPU is performing. Akash Network produces that information, but you have to collate it. You essentially need a big ass ledger, right, or blockchain, to account for stuff like, you have 1,000 GPUs in this pool. What's GPU 998 doing? What's GPU 2 doing, right? To understand the unit by unit economics, right? How long they're leased for, what rate they're leased for, which data center is sitting in, what is the cost associated with this data center? Because not every data center's cost is the same, right? So all of these minutia are going to be hopefully tracked at the kind of on-chain level or reported up to. Sorry, there's a train. Can you hear me?
No, I can hear you. Don't worry about the train.
Okay, okay. Okay, cool. So all of that, so that the software layer in terms of like the chain side of things, how is that going to be done? We need to determine, is Akash Network going to deploy or contract development resources in that effort? Are we going to partner with someone to do that part? So these are, conversations that are currently ongoing. In addition to that, there is the aspect of financing, right? How do we go through the financing? Well, there are partners, some of which one of them spoke at Akash Accelerate on the panel that I moderated, and their entire business model is to help finance GPUs on chain, right? And so that's really, really incredible, and they have really good servicing levels, right? I think it's like 15% simple interest per annum, which is like really, really good for something like this. And on top of that, right, there are two more layers, and there are some nuances in there, but two more kind of high level layers is the actual setting up of the entity that will essentially offer these things, setting it up correctly, doing the correct filing so that we're not in breach of any rules, right? Making sure we do everything, like I said, buttoned up completely. And one of the most important layer is doing all of the exploratory and outbound and taking the inbound calls from the demand side to ensure that when these GPUs come online, we have the requisite demand to fill them immediately as much as possible, right? So that's going to be, and all of these things have to happen in concert to ensure this program is a success, right? So it's essentially everything we have been doing for Akash Network over the last almost a year now, right? Since we brought on the initial big tranche of GPUs via PIP '01, just on steroids. So that's something. And now that we know we have the product market fit, we have the features, we have the right timing. It's we bringing this all together. All of those layers that I mentioned have to be kind of stacked at once to make sure this thing works, right? So it's a lot of moving pieces. And I say all of that to say it's not a trivial undertaking, and it's going to take some time to bring to market. I hope it's within a period of like 3 to 4 months, something like that, right? If not sooner. I mean, obviously, the sooner the better. We want to get these things moving. But I'll just say to manage expectations, like always buffer in a little bit of time. So I would say somewhere around that realm is probably going to be where things really, where the rubber begins to meet the road, and we hopefully can get this offering to public.
So basically a quarter plus, a little bit,
About a quarter, yeah.
Okay, cool. I think that really helps put that. I know like you're not going to be tied to this time frame, but it definitely helps set some expectations because people are asking where the docs are, where the update from you is now not everything is set in stone yet, but the idea of what you guys are going to be undertaking, is clear, like the vision of where we're going is clear, and the details are still being worked out, and we can expect some update in about a quarter. Does that sound about right?
Okay, cool. Yeah. Oh yeah. You can expect updates way sooner than that. We will do our damnedest to ensure as material updates that we can communicate are pushed out, right? And like I said, all those pieces are currently being worked on. Just prior to this call, I was talking with a potential partner for one of those layers, right? To and just set up a call with them on Wednesday to kind of go through this kind of whole ideation. So it's being worked on it's urgently being worked on, right? We just I had a working session all day with Greg on Monday this week, and then our head of product had a full day working session also together just yesterday. So we're pushing things as quickly as we possibly can. And so we hope that we want to get this to market quickly. You know what I mean? It behooves us to do so.
You want the moat as soon as possible.
Exactly. Exactly.
Yeah. So here, I want to definitely be respectful of your time. I do have more questions that I definitely want to ask, but perhaps I will make a second appointment with you, and then we can host that another time, basically.
Okay. But I have a few minutes if you're ready, but if not,
oh no,
I'm
ready. But it's more of a list that I think we want to tackle in a separate setting. So I would love to get you on calendar and perhaps take a second crack at it, at a different time. I definitely want to respect your time frame right now. So thank you so much, Mr. Chang Wang, for gracing us with your
Come on,
presence.
Chang. Just Chang. Just Chang.
And giving us an inside look, because this has been really helpful just to answer some of the questions from the community. Really appreciate the transparency. And I really look forward to having the part 2 of this, and because the community has a few more questions that they want to ask, especially around the community pool, some of the reasonings behind some of the more recent proposals. So definitely want to crack your thoughts on that. And well, I'll look forward to having another time with you. So thank you so much for your time. Appreciate it.
My pleasure. Thank you. Always.
Thank
Take
you,
care.
Chang.
Thank you for having me on. Thank you, Joe. Take care.